So I lost one really deep friendship when I started changing my relationship with money. And not because I became a different person, not because I got arrogant or forgot where I came from. I lost this friendship because I stopped being who they needed me to be. And I lost them because I decided to honor my own personal sovereignty when it came to money. Because changing your relationship with money is really changing your relationship with yourself. Oh, we're going to get really deep today because what nobody really talks about when breaking money cycles or money patterns is that sometimes the people closest to you have the most invested in keeping you exactly where you are right now. And this is the conversation that I've been avoiding since we started this whole series because it's messy, it's painful, and it doesn't have a tidy, neat solution. But if you've been doing this work, if you've been setting boundaries, changing patterns, healing your relationship with money, you've probably already felt it. That shift, that distance, that uncomfortable realization that your growth is threatening to some people. So today we're going to be talking about the hidden cost of financial healing that nobody really warns you about. And we've done 9 episodes in this Breaking Money Cycle series to date. We've covered money avoidance, self-sabotaging, money shame, the caretaker cycle. We've given you the frameworks, the tools, and the practical steps. But here's what we haven't looked at yet. And that is that when you start to begin this work, some relationships won't survive it. And that's not because you're doing it wrong. It's because some relationships were only possible when you were in those previous cycles. So today I'm going to be sharing why it is that your money healing threatens certain relationships, and it's probably not what you think. We're going to talk about the 5 relationship patterns that can't survive your own personal evolution with money, how to tell if a relationship needs time or whether it's genuinely over, and the actual conversation scripts for you when you do need to set boundaries. And part of that is navigating a very strong emotional conversation around grief work, which not a lot of us talk about with relationship ends. And so some of this may feel a little bit uncomfortable. It certainly feels very vulnerable for me to be talking about this with you today. But I know that this is a big part of your evolution and your journey. And if you're maybe feeling a bit confused as to why people are pulling away or why suddenly you've got clients leaving you if you're running a business, or why maybe now that you're seeing things differently for yourself, you're starting to observe patterns in other people, in other relationships that are actually bringing up some more money beliefs for you. Let's take a breath. So, why does this actually happen? Let's start here. Well, for many of you listening, maybe you have finally began to set some money boundaries for yourself. Maybe you started saying no to lending money out to family members or to clients or to people you work with. Maybe you've stopped picking up the tab every time you go out for dinner. Maybe you've started charging properly in your work. Maybe you've been an ask for that pay rise at work. And you thought that people are going to be happy for you, right? Everyone's going to be happy for you. And instead, perhaps what you're experiencing is silence, weird energy, maybe people commenting about how you've changed as a person. And what's really going on here is that your relationships were built on these agreements, these unspoken agreements, and you've just decided to break this contract. You have decided to break this cycle. And I remember when I used to be in the enabler pattern, this kind of caretaker role, I was the one that everyone would come to if they needed help. I was always the one who would say yes to everything. It wasn't coming from a place of just generosity. It was also that became my role in that relationship system. People knew what to expect from me. They knew I'd be there. And so when I started to put these boundaries in and saying things like, well, actually, I'm making this decision for my needs, then this is where some relationship changes started to happen. And it was really an identity shift. I wasn't the person anymore who they had signed up for, right? And that's the really hard part to navigate around this conversation, is that some people just don't want you to be healed because it shows up a part of them that they know also needs to be healed, and they're not ready for it yet. They're not there yet. Often people who have done a lot of personal development work find that their friendship circles will begin to change. Their main relationships will change, not because they are bad people now, but because your dysfunction or the way that you were operating in that paradigm, in that behavior, in that belief system served a purpose in their life. You may have become their safety net. You were the problem solver. You're the generous one. You're the fixer. You're the one who's going to take responsibility for everything. And now you're not. And your body knows this before your mind does, right? Think about the last time that you maybe set a boundary with someone close to you. Maybe it was in relation to money, asking for money that you were owed from a client who's been late paying and you've been avoiding having that conversation. And you've now decided to send that chaser email or to send it to a debt collection agency. Or maybe you've said no to someone wanting to borrow some money from you. Maybe your child has asked you, can you lend me some money, Mum? And you're like, no, actually, I'm not going to lend you this money, and this is why. Or maybe you've decided to go and speak to your partner about money, even though you've been avoiding it. Notice what has happened in your body. Maybe your chest felt tight, you felt a little bit nauseous. Maybe you had this overwhelming urge to take it back, make it okay, make yourself small again so they'll still like you. And it's a really interesting response to observe. And it's very often linked to a fawning response. Fawning is people pleasing. It's a psychological response. Many of you have heard of fight, flight, or freeze responses in our nervous system. The fawn response is one that you may not have come across. And it is this kind of danger response. We disrupted the relationship. Quick, make it safe again. Give them what they want. And this kind of people pleaser comes out. And what makes it really difficult is that you very likely might believe that, well, other people's comfort is your responsibility. It's your responsibility to keep the peace. And so when someone is upset about this boundary that you have decided, your body experiences it as a threat, right? And this is why we get these feelings that come up. For most of us, historically, when we think about boundaries or saying no or disrupting the peace, upsetting people is distressing. We don't want to upset people. Of course we don't. And as children, we needed relationships to stay safe. So we learned that in order to stay safe, to be what they needed, we needed to keep the peace. We needed to not rock the boat. And that's the interesting pattern to begin to notice. So notice those patterns, recognize those patterns. If you take your money story types assessment, if you haven't done so already, pause this and go and take the money story types assessment at katherinemorgan.com/quiz. And you'll be able to sort of really sense what some of those patterns might be. So if you are a enabler type, that's your main way of showing up with money, then people very often may have got used to you solving the problems, you going in and rescuing, you being very generous with money, and that's become the foundation of that relationship. So when you stop being in the enabler narrative, the enabler patterns and behaviors with money, they don't just miss the money, they miss who you were. And that's important to just sit with. If you're an impulsive type, the impulsive type was definitely my main story type narrative throughout all of my life up until my mid 30s. And as an impulsive, naturally, maybe you were considered in your relationships by your friends, for example, as the fun one, the one who always says yes to going to that last minute concert or to going shopping with you, being your shopping buddy. And the spontaneous one who's always said yes to everything becomes part of the identity in that friendship or in that group. So maybe if you all of a sudden start to say, well, I'm just going to take a bit of time to think about that, or let me just think, let me plan ahead for that. They're like, who is this person? Who is this Catherine now who's planning ahead? Right? They don't recognize the behavior which they're connecting to you, and you're connecting to identity, right? And so it is interesting to consider how these story types play out. If the pacifist, for example, is your main narrative, then very often the pacifist keeps the peace by not really having many financial needs or personal needs. And the pacifist makes relationships easy because they don't ask for anything. So if you have started to express your financial needs, it can disrupt that entire dynamic. So notice those patterns. And here are 5 of the most common patterns that I have observed around relationships and money, and see which one you identify with the most. Pattern number 1 is the one-way financial street. This is the relationship where money only ever flows in one direction, and often from you to the other person. So this other person will call you when they need something. They expect you to say yes to everything. They assume that you're going to help them financially. But when you need support, it's not there. And I've definitely felt this dynamic in relationships where I'll be the one to offer support. I'll be the one to help out. But then when I need it back, it's not there, or it's there in a really shallow way, like not in the same way that I would expect. Now, that tells you a lot about yourself, because if you're observing that, then maybe it is actually bringing up the fact that, well, actually there is an uncomfortable truth underneath this, that maybe I am overgiving, and then when I don't get it back, I'm feeling really resentful. And it's a hard one to sit with. And it may well be that one-way street relationship wasn't really a relationship at all. It was more of a transaction. And you breaking that cycle can feel like betrayal. It can feel like, well, I'm supposed to be the reliable one. I'm supposed to be the one helping them. And so to recognize this pattern, ask yourself, if I stopped being financially useful to that person, would this person still be in my life? If I stopped helping this person and reaching out and asking, how are you? How are you every week? Would they ask the same question back? That's the first question to ask yourself. And that's definitely a common pattern I've observed. The second common pattern is this struggle loves company dynamic. So this is where your friendship has started perhaps in this shared financial struggle. So you've almost like commiserated with each other, like complained together. Oh, like how terrible is this, that we are both in the start of our business journey. None of us are making money. It's so hard, isn't it? So hard. Maybe we make jokes about being broke together. We're broke buddies, and this can be part of your connection. And what's interesting about this, especially in the business world, is that when you start to earn more than the other person, it can create a disconnect. And it could be that you're starting to build wealth, or you're setting boundaries now with your clients, or things start to change and suddenly that dynamic just doesn't work anymore. And I unfortunately had an experience myself of this in a business friendship about maybe like 4 or 5 years ago now. I was in a really lovely friendship and we both started to earn more money and we both started to really evolve our work. And there was definitely a energetic thing going on about, I'm going to go and do this. Oh, I'm going to go and do this. And there was some threatening between, oh, well, you're doing the same thing as me and you're copying me. And like there was definitely some dynamics there that didn't feel comfortable. And neither of us really sort of wanted to talk about it. And eventually we did talk about it. And again, it created all this ickiness of, oh, like, okay, I won't do that then because you're doing that. And you feel like I'm copying you, and I honor that. I honor you sharing that with me, but I actually am really interested in this too for myself. But I just won't do it. And that became, I think, the foundations of where that friendship just was no longer working. And it was really, really goddamn hard to sit with that. Really hard to just go, oh, we just won't talk about it anymore, right? It was just easier to say, okay, I just won't do that thing. And it was the first sign, I think, that friendship was just coming to its natural end. And that's also okay. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. And it can bring up conversations in friendships or relationships that, oh, you've changed, you're a different person now. But remember, when we used to have those conversations, we were in a different journey, in a different chapter. And so it might be that friendship or that person, they're just not happy for you because your growth highlights their stuckness, especially if you've started that stuckness together. Your healing makes them look at the patterns that they're just not ready to really face. And Elizabeth Day, who's one of my most favorite authors, she wrote a beautiful book that talked about the dynamics of friendships in her book called Friendships. And she talks about how sometimes friendships just can't grow at the same pace. So when one person evolves, it can feel like abandonment to the one who's staying still. And that's just the real honesty of friendships. Some friendships are meant for a year. Some relationships are short-term relationships. They were only ever supposed to be short-term relationships. And I think it's an interesting conversation in society that sometimes we expect connection and friendships to stay, that they have to stay the same, or that we have to remain friends with somebody. And sometimes it just doesn't work out like that. A few years ago, I came out of a group of friends that I had grown up with for a long, long time. And not because I didn't want to be friends with them anymore, but because I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel like the conversations I wanted to have in that group were allowed. And not because they were telling me to be quiet or to stop talking about my business, but I just didn't feel like that friendship group was supporting me in that particular evolution of my life. And that's okay. It's okay to say, this friendship, this relationship has just changed now. And it's okay to make those decisions for yourself. It's okay to do that for yourself. The third pattern I would say that I've also recognized in this conversation is to do with family roles. And every family has certain roles. What is your role in the family? Has your role been the successful one? Has it been the struggling one? Has it been the helper? Has it been the achiever? Has it been the black sheep? Because when you step out of that assigned role, the entire family system becomes unstable. And it makes sense, doesn't it? If everyone has got to reorganize, or everyone's got to then accept that you are different, then if you've been the struggling one, your success threatens the family identity, the whole dynamics of that family. If you've been the generous one, your boundaries could feel, like you're letting them down. And if you've been the responsible one, suddenly not having all the answers or passing back that responsibility to other people can make people feel really uncomfortable. And family systems do resist change. Often the family systems, the cycles, talking about breaking money cycles, can go back through generations. This is the way that women in our family have always behaved. How dare you be the one to challenge that cycle or that behavior? So it does kind of expect that everyone needs to adapt to those changing roles. And most people don't want to adapt. They want to go back to what they're familiar with, what's easy for them. So your financial healing work is forcing everybody else to look at their own patterns, and they might not be ready for that. And understanding that is super helpful. Pattern number 4 is the status quo protector. So this is the person who actively has undermined your growth because your change threatens them directly. So they might start making jokes about your fancy new business. Oh, look at this fancy new business. That's never going to last. They might minimize your achievements. They might not even celebrate it. I remember, and well, I'll say this out loud. I remember when I published my book, and not one single person in my immediate family, parents, brothers and sisters, said, well done. Not at all. And I know that they all read it because it's on their bookshelf. But no one said, like, well done. It took me to ask them, like, what did you think about my book? Or, it took a lot to actually get their opinion. And one of my family members didn't like my book. They thought that I was making money from like personal tragedies and stories in my book. If you've read my book, you'll know some of those stories, because they were just looking at it from their perspective and not from the perspective of why I was writing it. And I felt really upset about that. I was like, well, the reason I've written this book is because I want to help people. I want to help people who maybe don't have money to go and work with a financial advisor or a therapist, or they need some help, but they don't know where to get started. That's the purpose of this book. The purpose of this book is to get it into the hands of as many people as possible. It was never about the money, hence the name of the book. It's not about the money. And for me, I got really deeply upset to hear that. And then I had to remember that that's okay. They can have their own opinions. They can have that choice for themselves. That's okay. And the minute I made that decision, the minute it was more helpful for me to continue my work. Okay, so people will make judgments about you. People will start to behave differently. They might even start to compete with you instead of celebrating with you. That's something that definitely happens and has happened to many of my clients. They might start gossiping about you to other people. And another one of my favorite authors, Brené Brown, she talks a lot about this in her work on vulnerability. And she says that we can only meet people as deeply as we've met ourselves. So if someone hasn't done the healing work, your growth will feel like judgment of their choices. They're not actually upset about your boundary. They're really just upset because your healing is holding up a mirror to their own avoidance, but they might not be conscious of that yet. So notice that particular pattern. Do you resonate with that one? And then the final one is the lifestyle or values mismatch. Now, sometimes people are not making judgments about you breaking cycles out of maliciousness. Sometimes relationships just outgrow each other. You're at different income levels, different priorities, different lifestyles, different professions. Maybe you've moved from one profession to the next. They want to go out every weekend still, and you're focusing on your business. They're buying houses and you're paying off your debts. They're having babies and you're building wealth. The friendship was perfect for a season, and seasons change. And this is where the Elizabeth Day book really helped me to understand about these different cycles of friendships and different cycles of relationships. And when we go through these different cycles, it can bring up a lot of grief, let me tell you, because no one's necessarily done anything wrong. This relationship has just served its purpose. It's met you both where you were, and now it is complete. And Elizabeth Day talks about this. She says a friendship ending doesn't mean it's failed. It just means it's fulfilled its purpose. Not every relationship is meant to last forever, and that's okay. It's not failure, that's just life. And it can bring up a lot of grief. And I think it's important to hold yourself in that emotion, recognize that that's what it is that you're actually feeling. And it might come up as anger initially. I'm angry about this. I'm angry that this person said something about me. I'm angry about this. And underneath anger very often is a deep sense of grief. So journal around that, sit with that, and allow yourself to feel that and acknowledge it. And then we can start to process that emotion. And sometimes it's also helpful to consider whether this sort of relationship or friendship is a temporary one or a permanent one. And some relationships just need time to adjust. We're not saying that all relationships, when you start to break these cycles, need to finish. Some relationships just need to adjust and almost need to be recalibrated. Some expectations need to be reset. And the friendship can evolve if both people want it to. And some relationships were only possible because of this behavior that you decided to stay in. Right? They need you to be the fixer, otherwise the relationship won't work. They need you to carry on struggling, otherwise they'll feel bad about the struggle themselves. Okay. So it is also important to think about, how do you tell the difference between, is this just like a temporary discomfort between this relationship, this friendship, or is it a long term? And how to tell the difference is that a temporary discomfort in these relationships, these conversations about money, might be where you have some willingness to talk about it. So there's some willingness there for you both. But the friendship, the relationship, the conversation just needs to evolve into something that honors that evolution. So it needs to honor the boundaries that need to be set. It needs to have an open conversation about being happy for you to celebrate your wins, for them not to undermine this for you, and asking yourself, really, can I be my most authentic self in this relationship? Or does this relationship require my dysfunction to function? And then give yourself permission to have that conversation to understand whether this is a temporary fix or whether this relationship has come to its end. And I think this is giving yourself permission. This is giving yourself permission to make that decision for yourself. And one of the most important conversations you will ever have is to have those really honest and difficult money conversations with other people. Now, if you know this is a conversation to go and have, there's a couple of resources I want to share with you here. The first is in chapter 46 of my book, It's Not About the Money, which if you don't have a copy, you can go and grab a free paperback copy that I will post to you at catherinemorgan.com/book. And in that chapter, I share the STRONG model. The STRONG model stands for share, talk, responsibility, openness, negotiate, and grow. And it's about building trust through honest conversations. You share the emotions, the feelings around money. You talk about the stories that you're telling yourselves. You both take responsibility for those patterns. And you're both open about your own needs and your own fears. And then you negotiate those new agreements together. And that enables you to grow and repeat the process. So it's not a one-time conversation, it's an ongoing practice. And it works for any relationship where money is creating tension, whether that's romantic relationships, business partners, or family members and friends. And the key to healthy money conversations in relationships is consistent, vulnerable communication rather than just avoiding the conversations entirely. And so before you have a difficult conversation about money, because maybe you are the architect and your partner is the impulsive, and every time money comes up, you want to plan ahead, be cautious with your money decisions, and your partner just wants to go and spend all the money. And before you go and have those conversations and understand through that STRONG model, we need to be grounded ourselves. So the first thing is to get grounded in your body. Place one hand onto your heart, one onto your belly, and just breathe. You can take 3 really lovely deep breaths just to really re-regulate your nervous system, your body. And if you're feeling nervous or stressed or worried about how this person's going to be when you invite this conversation around money, you won't be able to hold the boundary if you're dysregulated. So you need to feel safe in your body before you can have an unsafe conversation, what feels unsafe for you. And also understand the purpose of this conversation. Are you trying to save the relationship, or are you honoring this relationship? Because the conversation will be different. When you need to set a financial boundary with somebody that you want to keep in your life, it's going to be a different conversation to a conversation where you know that relationship just isn't working anymore. And so in the free resources that we've created for this podcast series, I'm going to give you a couple of script examples, not because I want you to follow the script word for word, but I want you to start thinking about how you can open up these conversations, how you can open up these conversations with somebody else. We've spoken about how to open up these conversations with yourself in previous episodes. And I want you to start to think about how can you go about having uncomfortable money conversations with someone who is different, has different values to you, who doesn't want to talk about money. That question comes up a lot in my community, actually. How do I talk to someone who doesn't want to talk about money? Okay. I'm going to give you some scripts and things that you can read through, and more than anything, to give you an idea of where to get started. So you can grab those resources at the link that's on the screen right now if you're watching on video, or at themoneypanel.co.uk/breaking money cycles. I'll put all the links to those in the show notes. And the conversation might be something like this. Well, first of all, pick your timing. Pick your timing for these conversations. If your partner's just come home from work and they're stressed, or they're just about to go and pick the kids up and take them to football, or you need to get dinner on the table quickly, not the best time to be opening up this conversation. Think about perhaps inviting, I would love to speak to you about this decision we're making around our holiday. I appreciate that right now is not the best time. When would be a good time for us to have this conversation? And put some time in the diary, right? Dedicate this as a money date and go and have that conversation. Do not try and attempt this conversation when you are stressed or your partner is stressed. And when you found that good time to have that conversation, then you may open it with curiosity, something like, I need to talk to you about something that for me actually feels really deeply uncomfortable, but this is really important for me as our relationship really matters, and I want to be honest. I've been doing some work on my relationship with money, and I'm recognizing that I need to set some boundaries that have been different to boundaries I have set before. And then name the boundary. Going forward, I won't be able to lend our son any money, or going forward, I might not be able to cover the costs of this, or going forward, I would like to put aside this amount of money for my own needs each month. And this isn't about you. It's not about you at all. It's about patterns that I'm breaking for my own financial health. And you can reassure them, I really value this friendship, or I really value this conversation in our relationship, and I'm hoping to find some ways that we can both make this work. And I really value your opinion, your input into this conversation, and invite that in. So it's a very collaborative conversation. And you could pre-frame it with, I understand this might be confusing, or I understand this might be a bit of a shock, or I understand that this might be difficult for us to meet this need. And it's really important that we do have this conversation. Can we talk about how this feels for you? And then listen. It's the most important step that most of us miss, because when we have these conversations, it throws up all this energy and emotion and fear and all these judgments and anger and resentment and all these emotions. And we don't really listen. We're just waiting for that person to finish speaking so that we can continue to say the same piece. And if you're the receiver of this conversation, really, really listen. Their response will tell you everything that you need to know about whether this relationship can evolve. And holding space for one another, that communication piece is really important. And I appreciate that not every relationship has natural great communication. Maybe you're a great communicator, but you feel like your partner doesn't listen to you. And so maybe that's the piece to open up. I really want to talk to you about money. And it's really important for me that you really hear what I have to say. Would you be willing to hold 3 minutes of just listening? And invite that in. And I think their response to that question will tell you a lot. So try that in your conversations. And I've also provided some scripts for you in the Breaking Money Cycles downloads that will support you in this. So go and grab those, have a read of those first, get yourself armored up and ready yourself to have those conversations. And I also want to say that one of the biggest emotions that has come up for me, I would say, around relationships and money is that grief piece. And what I had to remember was that it is okay to let go. It's okay to let go of those relationships, those partnerships that just aren't working and supporting your growth and where you're heading right now. Where you are heading now might not be where you've come from. And that's okay. You will form new relationships, new friendships, new business partners, new networking meetings, new connections that will support you, because you need people to celebrate your progress, your growth without feeling threatened. You need relationships based on who you're becoming, not who you were. And the challenge is showing up as your true, authentic self. And it can feel terrifying at first. So just start small. Share a celebration in a really safe space and notice who celebrates genuinely. Start a small boundary and see if the other person respects it. Be authentic about your journey and see who leans in. When someone celebrates your growth, really celebrates it, not with a, oh, that must be nice for you, but from a place of genuine joy. Let that really land in your body. Notice it, feel it, let your body learn that safe relationships exist. You're not looking for perfect people. You're not looking for people who are going to be your cheerleaders all the time. It's just you're looking for people who are doing their own work, people who can meet you in your growth because they're growing too. And the relationships that you lose weren't meant for the version of you that is healing and evolving. Some relationships are just perfect for survival mode. They helped you at some stage. They met you with where you were and they served a purpose, but they're not built for when you're thriving. And that doesn't make them bad relationships. It doesn't mean anyone's failed. It just means that they fulfilled their purpose. You're allowed to outgrow relationships. You are allowed to choose your needs over keeping the peace. You are allowed to grieve when you're not wanting to stay in that relationship, and know it's the right choice. And this is the really hidden cost of breaking money cycles that nobody talks about. Thank you for holding space for me to share this with you today. And if you are in the middle of navigating this right now, just know that if you're watching relationships shift and you're wondering if you're doing anything wrong, you're not. Growth can be very uncomfortable, and the difficult conversations, the script that I mentioned is going to really support you with this. And this will help you to navigate exactly what's happening right now in your life. And if you haven't taken the Money Story Types quiz yet, that's a really great place to start. Understanding your primary relationship with money is going to help you to see how your patterns show up in relationships and why certain dynamics feel harder to change. This is hard work. I really appreciate this is a hard conversation. It's a hard piece, probably the hardest in the whole series, because nobody wants to lose relationships. And sometimes the people we love just can't come with us. And our job is to keep walking anyway. And so if this resonated with you, if you're watching this on YouTube, please give me a thumbs up, and it really helps other people to find this when they most need it. Drop a comment as well, telling me which relationship pattern you recognized in yourself, and hit that subscribe button if you want more of this healing work. Thank you so much for listening to this Breaking Money Cycle series. And if you are curious to learn this work for yourself, come and join us in one of our experiences, our wealth resonance experience. If you want to dive into this for a personal money journey, want to learn some of the somatic and mindset tools, you can head to themoneypanel.co.uk/wealth-resonance. Or if you are curious to learn the tools to use this in your business for your clients and explore how you can become a certified financial coach, or to explore the tools that you can use with your clients, you can head to themoneypanel.co.uk/coaches. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you on the show next Monday. Take care.